War. The ultimate human tragedy. But paradoxically, conflict has often served as a dark crucible, forging some of humanity's greatest scientific advances. From radar and rocketry to antibiotics and computing, many key breakthroughs were accelerated or shaped by the pressures of war. In this video, we explore the strange, uneasy link between destruction and discovery. How and why does war drive scientific progress? And what moral costs accompany that acceleration? When war breaks out, it imposes urgent and often existential demands. Nations throw vast resources into solving technical problems. Because survival is at stake, tolerance for risk and failure rises. Normal bureaucratic inertia gets bypassed. In World War II, over 80% of US research funding was federally directed toward war priorities. During war, scientific effort becomes mission-oriented. Scientists, engineers, and institutions coordinate around common goals like code breaking, missile design, and medical treatment. Rivalry between states intensifies the incentive. If your adversary is making breakthroughs, you must catch up or perish. The TIZAD mission is one striking example. Britain shared critical advances, like the cavity magnetron, to accelerate Allied war effort and technological synergy. War pushes the state to integrate science into national strategy. Before the 20th century, science and warfare were often somewhat disconnected. With the world wars, governments built large war science institutions. For instance, the US Office of Scientific Research and Development coordinated massive scientific mobilization during World War II. After the war, many of these institutions or their equivalents persisted or influenced peacetime science funding and structure. Some historians argue that war transformed not just what types of science that was being conducted, but also the ways in which the knowledge was obtained, more centralized, mission-driven, and tied to military-industrial complexes. In war, technologies are tested in real time under stress. Failures are immediate and costly, so iteration cycles shorten. Military operations create living laboratories in the form of battlefields, medical methods, and logistics. Communication systems are adapted and refined continuously. A study of wartime innovation shows how operational concepts and new devices are integrated forward into combat theaters. We've now seen several mechanisms by which war can act as a spur. Next, let's look at specific historical case studies, moments when war and science collided, producing both wondrous and terrible outcomes. World War I was often termed the chemist's war. Chemical weapons, chlorine, mustard gas, pushed research in chemistry, toxicology, detection, and protective gear. Simultaneously, advances in wireless telegraphy, sound detection for submarines, and metallurgy were rapidly applied. Interestingly, even during wartime, theory continued. Relativity and astronomy work persisted. For instance, astronomers arranged for post-war eclipse observations. This is the most dramatic era of war-driven science. Many breakthrough technologies were either invented or matured then. Radar. The cavity magnetron, a key component of radar, was part of the TISAD mission to the US, significantly boosting Allied radar capabilities. The atomic bomb and nuclear physics. The Manhattan Project stands as the paradigmatic case of state-directed, large-scale scientific mobilization for war. Medicine or antibiotics. Penicillin, discovered earlier, was scaled up massively because war made mass infections an urgent threat. Scientists developed fermentation and mass production techniques. Rockets and rocketry as space precursors. The German V-2 rocket, developed under wartime pressure, later became a foundation for space programs. Computing and cryptography. ENIAC, initially for ballistic calculations, code-breaking efforts, and the general push toward digital computation, all accelerated. Operational research system science. The discipline of operations research, deciding how best to allocate limited military resources, was formalized during wartime. The scale of funding mattered hugely. The investments made during the wars spurred a spike in patenting and seeded post-war innovation clusters. After World War II, direct large-scale war was replaced by a geopolitical standoff, but the principle remained. Competition, particularly between the US and USSR, continued to drive science. The space race, Sputnik and Apollo, is a prime example. Arms race logic extended into civilian fields like rocketry and satellite tech. Military needs supported computer, satellite, missile, and guidance systems that eventually spilled over into civilian telecommunications, GPS among others. Even social sciences received military backing in areas such as psychological warfare, strategic studies, and intelligence. Twenty-first-century conflicts emphasize unmanned systems, cyber warfare, AI decision support, surveillance, and biotechnology. Military funding still shapes large-scale projects that often ultimately bleed into commercial and civilian spheres. Dual-use research that can serve both peaceful and military ends becomes more prominent and more ethically fraught. Some argue that war accelerates certain applied technologies but distorts the direction of scientific inquiry away from more foundational or curiosity-driven research. The study Project Hindsight, from the 1960s, assessed military-driven research and concluded that most of what was achieved was incremental or technologically oriented, with little direct contribution from pure basic science. This raises the question, did war create new science, or did it leverage science that already existed, just pushing it faster? Resources diverted to military ends might crowd out civilian or blue-sky research. There is risk of creating science that is narrowly geared toward weaponization or destructive ends. The structure of the military-industrial scientific complex can bias funding, institutional incentives, and even what counts as important science. Some dissenters argue that war's claim to be a stimulus is overstated, that peaceful competition, e.g., economic, cultural, could also drive innovation without the destruction. When scientists contribute to military projects, they face deep moral dilemmas. Take nuclear weapons and biological warfare as examples. After World War II, scientists and societies debated responsibilities, such as Oppenheimer's regrets and public discourse. Some proposals for a Hippocratic oath for scientists or ethical oaths have emerged, especially in light of the destructive potential of new tech. Some believe that international cooperation, peaceful competition, grand challenges like climate change, space colonization, and public health can replace war as drivers of scientific urgency. But the incentive structures, risk tolerance, and resource mobilization required is, without a doubt, harder to muster without the overriding existential threat that war brings. What if we had never had world wars? Would computing, nuclear physics, antibiotics, rocketry, and other technologies have taken much longer? Some historians argue that parts of those technologies would have emerged anyway, but more slowly and less coordinated. The wartime science apparatus, institutional frameworks, and state science partnership laid foundations for post-war scientific growth, such as the US Research University System, NSF, and national labs. Lesson: scientific progress is not inevitable or dramatic. External shocks, like war, space race, and pandemics, can act as accelerants, but they also, however, bring destruction and moral hazard. So why this strange link between war and scientific progress? Because war concentrates urgency, resources, and risk and forces societies to innovate fast. But this acceleration comes at immense moral and material cost. As we move into a future with AI, biotech, climate crisis, maybe our challenge is to channel that same intensity without the violence. Scientific mobilization doesn't have to wait for war. The question is, can we build structures and incentives that reward bold science in peace and restrain its abuses in war?